It's fantastic to have you here. It'd be great to talk about Jay Nachman's book, Graham Parker's Howlin Wind.
Okay.
Ultimately, that's your story. Firstly, welcome to the Strange Brew.
Well, thanks for having me, Jason. Very good. Very good. Everything I've read about it sounds cool, man.
How long has this been in gestation? When did Jay first approach you about this?
Dates, not my favorite subject, but probably a year or plus even. These things take time. I did a great deal of Zoom interviews, and he kindly sent me what he's written, and I could correct bits and pieces. He's not a musician, so he doesn't know a lot of terminology. I was explaining about what open tuning is on a guitar, how three of the songs were done like that, and who was playing what. And every other member of the Rumour did the same thing. They joined in. And I know Jay, I've met him quite a few times before, big fan. He does a few bits of promotional things for musicians and stuff here and there. Always very supportive. And he's just mad about Howling Wind. It's one of those things, college period, and people heard an album like that and never heard anything like it. Amidst all the American corporate rock, as it became sort of known, he had a group of friends who were really into heat treatment, and then he discovered Howling Wind. So I thought, if you're going to write, I mean, I've seen some of these books written, like how this album, Sticky Fingers or Astral Weeks, there's some company that does that, and there's no artist involved talking about it. It's just, this is what went down, but the artist isn't going to be talking to them. But this was like, to do it properly, you need to, even though our memories are mixed on this, of course, it's a long time ago. No one was taking notes, particularly. 1970s, leading up to the release of Howling Wind, April 76. So we had some disagreements, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff that was pretty close. We got it pretty tied in, pretty good. So it just seemed logical. If he's gonna do a book, let's do it properly. Everyone had a word, and all these people that were be just around playing with me, actually people I'd met in London on my quest to get somewhere, because I was living in the suburbs mostly at that point, out in Surrey, and there's not many people who would have understood a note of what I was doing, particularly musicians. I needed to be in London, and finally got into that, a little bit of the scene there. And people play with me for nothing, like they did in those days, because they heard the songs and thought, this is good. Who is this guy from nowhere? And it all led into Dave Robinson, who became my manager, and the Rumour. But there was so many people came forward to do interviews with him that we were peripherally involved, that I sort of vaguely remember the name of this guy, and I vaguely, okay, we played there. There was a rehearsal room, somebody's living room or something. There was all that kind of little bits of that going on before I met Dave Robinson and suddenly got into his realm. So even Bob Andrews, our keyboard player, he's passed away now, and we just did a tribute for him at the Half Moon in Putney with me and Andrew. Unfortunately, he lives in Yorkshire. The bass player, Andrew Bodner, he's not well enough to make the trip. He's unfortunately suffering a bit, but he's doing all right. Talked to him on the phone, and he's good, but he's a bit of tiredness and stuff that couldn't even make the trip down really logically. So we got Simon Edwards on bass from the band I've been working with, the Gold Tops backing band, and James Hallowell on keyboards to do Bob's parts, and brilliant. They were both brilliant. Nick Lowe was on the bill, Jonah Louie. So I did a bunch of songs with Nick, and Jonah did his big hits that Bob Andrews produced. And of course, Nick Lowe was in the Brinsley Schwartz band, so that all ties up. Worked with Bob way before I even had heard of these people, of course. So I just went along with it, and as I've jokingly said, it was the most tedious year of my entire life, talking about me. But that's sort of where we are now. We're at, the past, the past, the past. It's logical, and everyone else in this age group is pretty much in a similar kind of boat of talking about the past a lot. So it's worth embracing, and it's there. It's history, and that's that.
You've continued to sort of write and record material, and there's still, I think your last album was just a couple of years ago, and you've
Yeah.
you've been working with the label.
Big Stir Records is my latest one. The one before that was, they're an American label, California label, but they do press records in Britain and Europe. So that makes the prices good. 100% Records did the record before. So there was Last Chance to Learn the Twist was the last record. The one before was Cloud Cymbals, using more or less the same musicians that I dubbed the Gold Tops, the name of the studio, where the Cloud Cymbals record, and 100% Records are based purely in England. So that doesn't work out well for American buyers who want vinyl and CDs. But Big Stir Records cover both ends of it. They got some great acts, all kinds of very interesting acts. I just sort of found them by chance on Twitter and looked at their artwork and looked at the acts and thought, well, this is all pretty cool stuff, and said, I'm making a record. Do you want to hear it? Boom. Okay. They said yes. So off and running we went. They're good.
So you've got a combination of both, haven't you? You're still forward looking and still doing new material, but especially given some of the people involved in that formative period of potentially not necessarily in the best of health or may
Yeah.
sadly not be with us, it is also important to remember that work and shine a light, I guess, for new generations. And I assume this book also apologizes that period, and it also covers the run up, your early years
Yeah.
and into the 70s, and the various jobs that you had, and then learning your craft as well, all culminating in that release of Howlin Wind.
Yeah, all there. I mean, if you're going to do it, you might as well go back to childhood. And I've done bits of this before. Where did you grow up? What was it like? And what was your influences? The endless what was your influences question, which is wide and broad, as most people who grew up. I was born in 1950, so I was growing up in the 60s, and we were lucky enough to have this explosion of the British invasion, as it were, which is what it was called in America, because there it was. I was 12 years old, and this name, the Beatles, popped up, and there was this song, Love Me Do. And I thought, it's okay, stupid name for a band, but whatever. But it wasn't Elvis Presley, things that were a bit before my time, or Buddy Holly, or many of those, Bobby V, or Bobby Darin, and all those Bobbies and all that stuff. And Elvis Presley, I didn't hear the Sun Records stuff until later. It was these awful singles he had out, like Wooden Heart, where he sang in German, and he's got a rather operatic voice. And that was the sort of generation before me. My cousin, a bit older, we all had quiffs for a while until the Beatles came along. So it was just a lucky period to be a 12, 13-year-old and go through your teens with this incredible explosion of music that was suddenly it was like our music instead of something from the distant past, which Elvis Presley seemed to be to someone who was 12 then, and all those acts in that sort of pop rock and roll line. So we just went through all of that stuff and my childhood and most of the jobs that I did. There were a few we probably left out, but the jobs like the Chichester Rubber Company job, where I lived in Chichester for a while, and the bakery on the island of Guernsey, where I moved when I was 18 because I thought being in the suburbs is a big trap. The only thing your relatives want you to do is get married. Why aren't you married? Have you got a steady girlfriend yet? You're like 17. It's like they want to get you trapped somehow. They all shed. I noticed with my older siblings that everyone shed a sigh of relief when they got married. It was like, I don't know why. And I thought, there's something wrong with this situation. So I got the hell out and lived in Guernsey. So got into the psychedelic mode in that place. It was pretty amazing. Another of those periods when I was about 18, 19. There was quite a lot of jobs that I did. Factory making, the fine blanking factory, making these parts for machines that you stamped out of a big piece of metal. There was even Rank Wharfdale speaker parts. That was about as close to the music industry as I was ever going to get, I pretty much figured, but at that time. Also, trying to clear up this pub rock mythology that, like pretty much every other person in Britain, nobody knew had heard of pub rock, instead of this mythology that everyone was, it's all pub rock. We went down the pubs and we played rock. No, no, no. Nobody knew about it that I ever knew. And there I was in London and got a record deal. And at some point, these reviews came out, and I learned, okay, this was a thing. This was actually a thing. These bands played in pubs. Well, so did the Rolling Stones. Hold on a minute. They played in the Wooden Bridge in Guildford, near where I grew up. That was a pub. That's what you did. So, but this was it was a bit different because in London it was mainly it. This is I just learned the history of these people that I'm playing with. Suddenly, there's Nick Lowe producing me. Never heard of him. No, Brinsley Schwartz. I'd seen the name in the back of the papers. Thought it was a German heavy metal band. Ah, Brinsley Schwartz. I don't know. I'm just seeing them playing small clubs, but never heard any of this. And most people I knew, and I was in London squats most of the time. Nobody mentioned pub rock. We were listening to King Crimson, and stuff like that. Just a few years before my career, really. I was still in a bit psychedelic mode. God knows how I wrote Howling Wind, but I suddenly came out the other end of it really angry, the totally opposite of peace and love. So all that's been recorded in Jay's book, and it's nice to have it in one place instead of bits and pieces. So if you want to get the true dirt on the story, the whole bit, that's the book to go to. And it's out on Amazon, so I'll give it a plug. He did a lot of work. It was just the arc of the way that it flows is very well done, I think. So I'm proud of what he did as much as anything. And everybody said, yeah, let's be involved in this.
It is an interesting story because for me it takes us from the mid 60s and your time at the local ballroom and
Yeah,
10 years. They've got that 10-year path as your musical taste developed, going from
yeah.
soul into blues, Guernsey, the more psychedelic stuff coming in, and then a series of jobs, and then starting to, by the early 70s, hone your craft as a songwriter, meeting pivotal people on the way. So it was not like a straight line journey, is
No,
it?
no, nothing straight line about it. No, no, and no guarantees at all. There I was working in a petrol station, living after doing the Guernsey thing, the Chichester thing, then the Morocco thing, and living in Gibraltar. Back I came, and I actually appeared on Gibraltar TV. I bet there's no footage of that now. They probably went over the tapes in those days. I don't know, probably a branch of the BBC, because if somebody had a guitar and they weren't from Gibraltar, somebody had to go there and call them up and say, "Oh, there's a guy here from England. He's playing guitar down in this bar now and again." And I joined a band in Gibraltar, which was him. We took ourselves to Morocco to play, because I started off in Morocco. You run out of money after about a year of hiking around and having a great time just in this amazingly different culture. And then, the freaks would say, "Well, if you run out of money, go to Gibraltar." I went to Gibraltar a couple of days later. I had a job on the docks and found this dive bar where nobody seemed to go apart from a handful of these musicians, these musicians that lived in Gibraltar. So I joined up with them and we played basically psychedelic sort of stuff that wasn't very good. They didn't have any discipline. It turned out their father was extremely wealthy. But I was writing just songs, just endlessly. I mean, that was the path that led me to where I realized I started to find a style that I thought was mine and was related to soul music and stuff from way before the psychedelic era. And then there was these Van Morrison solo albums, tremendously influential because he was obviously thick with soul music and the jazz influences that came through in my work, like Lady Doctor on Howling Wind, for instance. From listening to the radio pre-Beatles, we'd hear the Duke Ellington and Nat King Cole and all kinds of interesting stuff like that was exotic music from another land, but was popular in Britain as well. So all of this stuff, yeah, there is no straight path. There was no straight path at all for me. The clincher was putting an ad in the Melody Maker, which is what a lot of people, out of desperation, I thought, what am I going to do? And I met a bunch of people around my area who answered the ad, and they were clueless about what I was doing, really. So it was just that one musician in London, Noel Brown, who had a band called the Tooting Fruities. He just knew these other people, Paul Riley, bass player, who was in a band that were called pub rock, and Chilly Willy and the Red Hot Peppers. They were known as a pub rock band, apparently, or they played pubs. But everything they did was eclectic music, which we now call Americana or roots music. That's it. They're pretty much not much different from some of the early 60s bands, and more down home, I suppose, in a certain way. And so there it was, and I found myself in front of this Irish guy named Dave Robinson who had managed these alleged pub rock bands.
Had you lost your, I don't know if lost is the right word. You'd had a publishing deal a few years earlier. Was it
True.
Larry Page's
Yeah, it was the
organisation?
Larry Page of full of hits or something. I don't think I ever met him. It was two guys who were they had Tower Bridge Music, this little thing called, but it was under the umbrella of Larry Page. I think Jay actually printed that piece of paper where I had the deal. So it was a publishing deal for like a 50-50 deal. In those days, that was kind of a bit normal, I suppose. But my songs were still not quite there. They were still, for me, they weren't.
Generic or aping certain styles?
No, they didn't know. I didn't know. I didn't have the definition of what I was. I was still a bit. Some of the songs were still a bit from the sort of hippiedom kind of thing. A bit. James Taylor also was an influence, and Jackson Browne and those kind of singer songwriters. They were parallel with psychedelic music, like the Pink Floyd, the King Crimsons, and stuff that was related to that. Steve Miller Band, and then Abraxas came out, the fabulous Santana record. Parallel to that was the singer-songwriters, Joni Mitchell. I mean, she wasn't a great influence to me, particularly the music, but the fact that she could play an instrument and sing, and that's all you needed. And James Taylor could do the same. I never heard him play solo, but then later on there was John Prine. That was quite a bit later on, just before my career began. So those things came into the influence, but they were still a bit airy. It was still a bit, there was one song, "It's all right, children, it's all right," and it was not. It was very good. The melodies were good, and another song called "Hey There, Believer," something about criticizing religion a little bit, but kind of gently. But they were not quite good enough. Not quite good enough. There was a record came out called "That's When You Know," which had a lot of those demos on. Also, there was the Middlesex tapes that came out on my website, because that's escaped a long time ago on cassette form. So there's a lot of those songs, they've been out there. That's When You Know was put out by, I don't know who was it, but it was on they were recorded. A lot of the songs were recorded in Marble Arch Studios after I got my record deal. So I just threw everything on there. I just threw not everything, because there've been hundreds of songs I've written. Hundred. I mean, they just throw them away, not good enough. Moving on, moving on. New influences, new influences. That was the way it went. And then I think I wrote Soul Shoes, Back to School Days. Suddenly I was very excited to sound more like the Stones, early Stones, something related to that. And Silly Thing, a very catchy song, but obviously got a rootsy feel to it. And the nature of the band gave them that Americana rootsy thing. It wasn't going to be like Cold Hearted making singles. It was going to be a band playing, really a band. And at that time when I'd written Soul Shoes, even then I could hear a horn section, and I thought, there's the path to take. Reinvent soul R&B as this white guy from the suburbs. And it had been done before, but it all sounded like me. There was obviously Van Morrison influence, a bit of Dylan on that first album with "You Got to Be Kidding," that song. So all these massive influences suddenly came online for me, and I could write them all of a sudden. And this wasn't as affected. It was, this was real. Then Don't Ask Me Questions came along. I thought, boy, what a first line. Crimson autograph is what we leave behind everywhere man sets foot. And I realized then, no one's stopping me now. Even though it was not in fitting with the music that was on the charts or even the album, people were still going to see Tyrannosaurus Rex, like I did, cross-sitting, cross-legged, or Incredible String Band, who were a very big influence in the psychedelic days, because they could write a variety of songs. There could be three total different influences in one song, a blues and trippy and monk singing or whatever the hell they did. They were brilliant. All of these influences came into play, but essentially I got it down to rock and roll, basically. Took away the any pretensions of anything else. I realized I'm not going to be a virtuoso guitarist. That took, it took a while to shrug these bits off and realize I am a singer-songwriter. And it was, whether it's in the style of the classic troubadour singer-songwriters like the James Taylors and David Blues and all those people from the 70s, or whether it was going to be with a band. But it turned out to be, as soon as I was writing the songs, it was obvious I need a band, and they better be tough and hard and rock. And my songs dictated that, and luckily the Rumour picked up on it. No messing around. It was like, yeah, this is what we need. We need something to cut through all the tripe. The prog rock was still big in 75, 76. It wasn't, as people think, all punk rock. That was, that broke on the high street in October 77 with the Sex Pistols, really. That's when it broke on the high street. But there was the Damned, came along, and before that, there's, I suppose, the Stranglers, the Ramones, of course, monster influence from America. So that was creeping in at the time I was making Howlin Wind, and that year of 76. But that really exploded in 77, and I was making my third album by then. So that was how I felt about those songs that made Howlin Wind. And I thought, somebody somewhere is going to recognize this. It'll be hard. I knew it. I was fighting against the wind. But there it was. Dave Robinson had heard his stuff and got me on this radio station with that song Between You and Me, which again is a classic singer-songwriter song. It really is. The guy on a guitar playing his own, that's what it is. And that got me a record deal from the guy from Phonogram, Nigel Grange, called up. As Dave Robinson said, there was a documentary about me. He said, what normally takes forever, it took about a week with Graham Parker. And as Dave said, Graham always thought it would be like this. He had his own vision of it, and I did. I thought, if the right person hears me, that's it. People will understand it from then on. Enough people, they'll get it. Like anybody else, I thought, like even the Beatles, when Ringo was questioned, what do we want to do when this all falls through? Which of course was going to be any minute. Everyone thought you don't last in pop music, you last a short time. And he said, own a hair salon. I didn't want to own a hair salon, but I thought if I could get as far as 3 albums, that would be an enormous thing. I'd have some critics like my first 2 albums, and then the third one would be kind of weird and wouldn't work very well, and that'd be it for me. Maybe I'd have enough money to have a Masonette and Maidenhead or something and live happily ever after and do the marrying thing, whatever you're supposed to do in the suburbs. Maybe that would be it. And I'll be down the pub and say, oh, Graham, you made some records, didn't you? Yeah, did you went to America? Yeah, cool, bloody great. I'd be the guy at the bar. But it didn't quite work out that way. It turned out to be much, much harder work than I thought, because I kept just touring everywhere. And okay, quick, we need another album. Let's do more albums. Another record label pays me even more money than the last. Ridiculous amounts of money. The 80s. It's so it's all a bonus, really, I suppose. Yeah.
And it all seemed to start I guess the roots of it really started to kick in 1974. But where you were on the 1st of January 1975, starting to play in London, to the end of 1975, I don't know if the Rumour were in place by then, but it all seemed to happen, that kick off in 1975.
Yes, it did. Yeah, that's when it locked for me, when it all finally came through. Later in that year, we were rehearsing. Me and the Rumour were rehearsing. By the end of the year, around December into January, we were making Howlin Wind. And we did a few gigs prior to that. We did a few gigs in 75. So that was the year when they'd heard my stuff, and I had just about enough songs to make an album. In fact, we were still playing, so we were playing live, and I was still writing. White Honey was one I particularly remember. I played to Dave Robinson. We'd just done a gig, and I sat on the side of the stage. The audience was gone, and said, hey, Dave, check this out. And I played the riff, and he said, oh, that's great. Fantastic. Hold that thought. Write that one. So that was one of the later ones, and it had all that swing in it that I was so keen on bringing into music again, getting away from the plodding rock thing and into the swing and R&B soul swing of things. And swing is not something that everybody can play. It's internal syncopation. And if you want to know what it is, listen to, I don't know, Drinking Wine Spodioti by Jerry Lee Lewis. Listen to Chuck Berry, Maybelline, or Nadine, or even Johnny B. Good. Listen to this. If there's an internal syncopation to it, which makes it not rock, it makes it rock and roll, and it swings. And you can dress that up as slightly different kinds of music, more of a pop style or whatever. But the swing is not every musician can get that and do that. And luckily, the Rumour are pretty damn good at it. So that they reflected my songs.
Again, I don't know if fortunate is the right word, but link up with Dave Robinson,
Hmm.
the Hope and Anchor, his connections,
Yeah.
the people that he knew, whether it was Charlie Gillett or members of
Yep.
Bruce Swartz and
Yep.
the pub rock bands. As one person to link up with, he must have just been perfect.
He was the man, really. Yeah, because I mean, Charlie Gillette's show, for one thing, there I was in the suburbs, London radio. I don't know. I'd never heard of it. Didn't know anything about it. The same with these musicians, Martin Belmont from the Ducks Deluxe, who had been a band that played. All of those guys played universities and theatres as well, but they'd kind of got to that point where they couldn't. They'd had record deals before. They'd released records. They'd had a few fellow traveller fans on these Universal. I think United Artists, I think, or A&M or something like that. Um, but nobody had heard them outside of a very small circle. But I think the point they started just going to pubs was, okay, enough of all this. Let's stop trying to make it and let's just play music. And even that, then that fizzled out really, because I came along and all I found myself was I was sort of in a circle of people whose bands had broken up. Even Chili Willy and the Red Hot Peppers, who and Paul Riley from that band, and had introduced me to Dave, and the Brinsley Schwartz band, the Ducks Deluxe, and Andrew and Bodner were playing in a band that didn't really get anywhere, but they were the same kind of lines. Where do we play? Small places like pubs, you know. So they were all broken up, and I sort of parachuted in, and there was Dave Robinson and he had his 8-track studio there in the Hope and Anchor, which is where that actual track Between You and Me was recorded. And that ended up on Howlin Wind, because whatever the Rumour did with it, to me, it didn't work as well. It had a magic to it, absolute magic. And so Dave was good producer in that sense. He knew what to do there. So we just recorded a bunch of stuff there, and the record deal came in, boom, just like that. And that's it. Then we were in a professional studio.
Who was the contact for Dave Edmunds? Because he played on Back to School Days, didn't he?
Oh, I think he produced a Brinsley Schwartz album. They backed him. They had a relationship with Dave. And Dave wasn't really doing much then apart from his head. He was in Rockfield Studios in Wales, where I recorded Heat Treatment. I think he was there doing a lot of production. I felt like I'd pulled people out of hibernation a little bit, because I hadn't heard Dave Edmunds' record in years. I mean, there was that fabulous I Hear You Knocking, obviously, special record that. And he did like a Supreme song, I think he did these kind of singles, and did a bit of Phil Spector sound here and there. He was really into a big sound. People said when they went to Rockfield and were up late at night with him, he put things on the speakers and your hair went back. It was so deafening, compressing everything and doing this and Phil Spector-esque things. But suddenly there he was in the studio with me. Somebody mentioned Dave, we know him, he's a friend. And somehow that idea came up. What a natural. Put him on Back to School Days, which he then covered on a record. Suddenly, after me, he was making records. It seemed I felt like I'd pulled a few people back into activity all of a sudden. And that was a very good feeling. I felt like I'm moving and shaking here a bit, really. And what a thing to have Dave Evans on the guitar. Stupendous, really.
You've had some quite notable artists cover your music. At Soul Shoes, that was covered by Roger McGuinn and Chris Hillman, obviously
Yeah.
used to be in the Birds.
They did, yes, yes. And I met Roger recently and reminded him of it. He remembers it. Oh, good. He did. I think they did Back to School Days as well. So
Mm,
good songs there. I met him after seeing a show of his. And yeah, Rick Nelson did one of my songs. Back to School Days, was it?
really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Rick Nelson.
Wow.
Oh, what did he do? Was it Back to School Days or Soul Shoes? Yeah, the people were doing stuff from that first album. I think it took them back to their roots a bit as well, because they'd been through pop stardom, really. So anyway, that was fantastic, all that stuff. A really, really great thing. And more obscure people covered some songs, pretty good, some of them as well. And later on, well, Rod Stewart later did Hotel Chambermaid, which was on my second album. That song is right up his street for sure. Took him a long time, but he did it, which was great. The Pointer Sisters did Turned Up Too Late, years after the fact. Not when they were having that string of pop hits, but they did an album of songs. I think they did a Springsteen song. They were doing kind of a rock songs, but in their soul singing style. Really good. So there was a few more than that. I can't think of them now. There's been quite a few over the years that you wouldn't have heard of, not from Howlin' Wind particularly, but from other records.
But those first few albums had as bigger impact in the States as the UK, didn't it?
Yes, only critically though. Only
Right.
critically.
Musicians as well. Bruce Springsteen must be
Yes.
one.
Yeah, musicians picked up on it. Yes, we were a musicians band to a certain extent, but radio in America was definitely not friendly in 1976. But we toured. We did long tours in 76, a station wagon tour, and by the end of 76, I think we might have even had a tour bus. And we hooked up with this band, Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes, who had horn sections, and we would do a double bill with them where we would be on first. Then we got them to come to the UK and do those tours with us, opening for us. But a lot of musicians, I think Phil Lynott was down from Thin Lizzy was down at the studio when Howling Wind was going on. I mean, he was there and he came to sound checks and things. They were just in on it. With getting records sold in America with records like Howling Wind and Heat Treatment just wasn't going to happen.
Was it
It
like
needed.
Boston and Kansas? Was that the
Yes,
music
it was.
scene?
Yeah, very much so. There was that. There was corporate rock, as it came to be known by the critics at Rolling Stone in the end, who much preferred me. And so we got that kind of press. I got this amazing press, and people were saying, "Who the hell is he? Why is he number two on the Paz and Jock poll in the Village Voice?" I got a record one, and I think it was one. No, Squeezing Out Sparks was number one on that in '79, and Squeezing Out Sparks started that changed things quite a bit. You know, suddenly we were in quite a lot of bigger places playing. So it was a very pretty good role, really. And record companies just kept paying way too much money for me. They thought I was going to be gigantic at any minute, and I always disappointed them, which was quite pleasing, really. Just
You
keep
were
giving me money.
even you were even labelled at one point as are were many artists as like the next Dylan.
Oh, well, that was immediate. Yeah, I think the first thing written about me was in sounds. And there's a picture of me with headphones on in Eden Studios when we were recording Howling Wind. Could this be the new Bob Dylan? And I thought, damn straight. Of course. At the same time, it's like, oh no, I hope this doesn't go on for long. Don't, please. But people heard the record, and whatever you think, it sounds like this bloke, Graham Parker. The English is mixed up with the Americanisms there.
Heat Treatment, that must have been quite a quick follow-up to Howling Wind.
Oh, same year, yeah, 6 months apart, I think. I'd done Howling Wind, and it was like, there's my life on that record. Well, it wasn't really. I'd written hundreds of songs before it, but it felt like that. Okay, I didn't even think about following up, especially not within 6 months. And Dave Robinson being ever quick-witted about it, said, "I think we need a record soon. The second record. We need to follow this up quick. Don't give it a lot of time. Going to be a lot of people coming along copying you." That's what he said to me. A lot of people are going to be copying you. They're going to be like you. You better get another record out. So somehow I dredged up a few old bits and pieces of songs, but retooled them and wrote brand new ones in a short period of time between with touring going on. It's amazing how I ever got albums out as quickly as I did because we were touring so much. And I'd write a little bit then, but it's kind of distracting when you're touring. But somehow I'd get an album together between albums, just magically, and so we recorded that, the second record, and it was out 6 months later, man. I have no idea how I did that. Absolutely no idea how I followed through with Dave's mad suggestion. You don't do that. I mean, that was not like the pop bands when they had to have a single out every 3 months. Well, that's just one song. This was an album, and it was album music. It was music you needed to listen to. And I pulled it off somehow, and Stick to Me wasn't long after in 1977. So yeah, and even in the 90s and stuff, I was still knocking out records and writing at pretty good speed. And actually, just before the last couple of records, I suppose, I'd still be finishing an album. And by the time I'd finished it, I'd written a couple of other songs, thinking, oh, I can't wait to get the one I've made out of the bloody way so I can move on. My object was always wipe out the existence of the last album. Wipe it out. It doesn't exist for me anymore.
Do you
This
think it
is,
worked against you a little bit?
it may be. I mean, I wasn't, I I did a lot of interviews and TV, in America, all over the place. I know I did a lot of TV because I get an AFTRA pension, an American pension from AFTRA, SAG-AFTRA. That's weird, and lots of TV appearances and being in a movie as well, Judd Apatow movie. That helped. So I built up a big body of work in that respect, and the videos that got played as well back in the day when you actually made money out of that, because I'd be on a TV show, something quite big, and they'd play clips of videos, and all this money would suddenly be dumped on me. That's weird. I'm not having to hit records or anything in particular. There were also that great time when suddenly it was all CDs. Everyone was throwing their albums out or putting them in the attic, and my records all sold again on CDs. But it was just like, whatever, man, I've got to make a new record. That's what's important. So I've just had that attitude. I just kept the reason being the quality of the songs. I've always thought I've written this new couple of songs here. They're as good as anything I've ever written. Keep going, keep going. I wouldn't have done it without that. I wouldn't have done it at all. I didn't want to ever waste people's time. From the beginning, Howlin Wind, I could have maybe, if I'd got a record deal earlier with some of my stuff that was this and a bit of that and not quite there, if I did that would have been possible. It could have been possible, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to go off without all the barrels loaded. That's why Howlin Wind, it took me that long, really. And it was worth it. Every song is like, okay, I don't have any fear of any of these songs. So, and I've done that ever since, in my view.
I know you reunited with the Rumour over a decade ago,
Yeah.
and recorded again. How does, looking at both periods of you collaborating with the Rumour, how does your solo work compared to the albums that you made with the Rumour?
Well, yeah, there's definitely a distinction about the Rumour. There has to be. There's bound to be. The reason I stopped it was not due to conflicts of interest or anything like that. It was due to the fact that it was 5 albums, studio albums, I think it was, 5 years of us being together. And we're kind of repeating ourselves by, okay, you do an album, you go on tour. Okay, you do an album, you go on tour. I stopped that in '88 by insisting I wasn't going to tour. And it worked out okay. They still sold pretty well out the up escalator. Didn't seem to make any difference. So I thought, well, that's good, but still, I wanted to get out there and play. So I continued to it after that. But it was good to have a break. I just wanted to see how my music sounded with other musicians, really. Of course, and deliberately, the musicians and the producer I used on Another Grey Area, which was the post-Rumour album, I deliberately wanted them a very different sound. We were coming into a new decade, and after that came out in '82, sounds were beginning to change. It was starting to get a bit technical and stuff. It affected everybody. I was glad to get out of the end of that, actually, that period of the '80s, because it was doing a bit of disservice, I think, to the songs. But obviously, they're going to sound different from the Rumour.
Yeah.
It just is what it is. And I made a lot of records where I was playing all the stringed instruments, even the bass guitar. I bought myself a bass and learned to play that and did pretty good at it. I think did some good stuff. But some of the records are as good as any as the Rumour made. The Struck by Lightning record, I think, Deep Cut to Nowhere, Don't Tell Columbus. I mean, these are right up there to me with any of the best stuff. Not going to sound exactly like the Rumour. I mean, Struck by Lightning had Andrew Bodnar and Steve Goulding were on that, I think, Rumour guys, yeah. So I've interacted with them. Brinsley Schwartz was on the production thing with me and played guitar, and Andrew Bodnar as well on the Mona Lisa's Sister in 1988. Of course, it's not going to sound like the Rumour. Wouldn't have wanted it to. What I wanted was a record that didn't sound like the 80s. So I said, okay, this is about the singer and the song, not the drum sound. Drum sound doesn't matter. It's a drum, for God's sake. Just put mics out and record it. And I started off that album, just me on the guitar. Okay, that's recorded. Now put some drums to it. And then I sort of adjusted it a bit to just me on the guitar and voice, live vocals, live acoustic guitar with Terry Williams, who was in a group called Man, I think, years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so. Terry Williams. And then he was in Dire Straits, who were the biggest band in the world at the time. I got him for that Mona Lisa's Sister album, and there were some reggae tracks on there. He said, I'm not good at it, not my favorite subject. So I got Pete Thomas of The Attractions, who I'd seen him play before. He was enlisted in The Attractions at a club in California. What a drummer. It's neither here nor there to me to imagine trying to recreate your early bands with different musicians. What a nutty thing to do. It's mad. And the songs are different. They're just different songs. Listen to the songs on the Mona Lisa's Sister, radically different from Howlin' Wind. But you know it's me. You know who it is. That's not going to change.
Fantastic. And then looking back, what's your appraisal of Howlin' Wind? How do you see it amongst your work?
Oh, top work, yeah. Yes. If your first album isn't your top work, you're lacking something. I suppose it's rare for that, really. It's supposed to be a rare thing. But for me, it was basically getting there the hard way, writing all those songs and really being smart enough somehow in my stupid brain, not good enough, not good enough, keep going. And then they were absolutely good enough. I took first class, and I still think it's a great album to listen to. I mean, I don't sit around listening to my albums, but to do this album, I did, and I thought, okay, I listen to it, not on a vinyl, but on an outboard speaker coming from whatever iTunes. Buy my own records on iTunes. At least I'm getting something from me. I'm paying myself. And Andrew, I talked to him, and he said, yes, I'm listening to it on vinyl. It's fantastic. It's so great. Whatever Nick did was really good. And it's so different from Heat Treatment, so different from Stick to Me. It has this great in the studio with the band feeling to it as well, Howling Wind, somehow or another. So, yeah, so it holds up totally to me. No worries about it.
Getting the book by Jay Nachman, Graham Parker's Howlin' Wind. You mentioned Amazon. There's a website, grahamparkershowlingwind.net. And then have you got a website? Yeah. Are you grahamparker.net? Is that
yes, that's my official website. So there's a link there, but I think if you looked it up on Amazon, you should find it. There is the grahamparker.net is the sort of homepage website run by a chap who's run it for years, John Howells, and tour details get up on there. And I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky, so I usually say, okay, the gigs are coming up and put them on there. I started Instagram but didn't like it, so I have an Instagram account. For some reason, I didn't get on with it.
Doesn't work for me either.
Yeah. Now, there's an official Facebook page. That is official. It started off as a fan. Nobody knows, it seems to know. But I let the record companies run that. I always say to a new record company, okay, contact the old record company and ask them for the login details. I've never done the Facebook. I feel a bit ashamed of it sometimes because I know a lot of people from my childhood have dropped notes there back in the past, and I never have done anything with it. And maybe one day it might be the thing to do, get rid of all the rest and actually learn how to do Facebook. I mean, I'd rather do none of it, but there you go.
Yeah.
It's addictive as well. That's the worst thing.
You've got to be careful, haven't you?
Yeah, it's addictive. It's good to pull away from it, but I love the idea, the instant communication, because people used to find out about the gigs I was doing, especially around America, where there's, you're playing in New. Sometimes I'd be doing 6 gigs in New Jersey solo, or with one of my American backing bands like the Figs. I could be doing that every year, and other places. And people find out too late because they didn't read the local paper or walk down the street past the club that they go to and didn't see my name. At least now, everybody's got a better chance of finding out that you got a new record out and gigs. So you got to give it credit for that. So I guess we're stuck with it, aren't we? Really?
It's a really good book. It's a really good album. So what more do you want? Go and get both again.
That's brilliant. Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate that, Jason.